The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I am your host this season, and we are into Valentine's Week, you guys. We have made it. It doesn't quite feel like Valentine's Day here. I know it's in the 60s, I believe, this week, but it's here. It's here, and we are diving into literacy this season. So I've got our new joke for you. We're going to take a little trip over to a foreign country, in the sense that I'm going to ask you what, as far as the Autobahn, which is the highway in Germany, how is that like the alphabet? Do you know? How is the Autobahn like the alphabet? You're likely going to see a VW behind you. You're likely going to see a VW behind you. Definitely for my older users, maybe even my adults out there. But as somebody who's been to Germany, that one kind of tickled me. So speaking of journeys and literacy, our next guest is amazing. She is a leader. She is someone who also has literacy near and dear to her heart. And so we are going to jump into an interview with Elisa Wern today, and we're going to talk all about a book study of comprehensive literacy for all, what that journey looked like, how you can be a part of it, and just diving into the topic of literacy and the value of it. So I hope you get a lot out of it. I for sure did, and I think it's going to be one that you come back to. So without further ado, here is our interview with Elisa Wern. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm your host, Lara Hayes, and I'm just going to turn it right over to my guest right now because I am so excited she's here. You can kind of see her information on the screen, but if you aren't watching, can you just give us a little bit about who you are and I guess just your background too?
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. So my name is Elisa Wern. I am an occupational therapist by trade. That's my schooling. But I do have a master's degree in special education. And then I have my resident ATP, which honestly, that was a pathway of just wanting to expand my knowledge. So I work full time for a school system, doing assistive technology and a bunch of other things. And then spend a lot of my not work time working and supporting a lot of other projects, some of which we'll talk about today.
And Alyssa, you're one of those people that I think wears a lot of hats, because had I not known that you were an OT, I would have been like, is she? Is she? So some of the things that you've talked about in the past, maybe can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you landed in the ATAAC world?
Absolutely. So it was one of those things where I was serving students as an occupational therapist in a school setting and started just because of my students, my learners' needs. I started integrating a lot of technology. At that time, there was no kind of district AT position in our district, and they saw what I was doing, saw some of the outcomes we were having, and said, would you be interested in doing this, like big picture for the district? And I said yes, and kind of the rest is history. I do a lot of things in my day job. Some of those cross over to the private work I do, and some of them don't. I supervise and support our OTs and PTs in our school system. Do a lot of technology support, and that's really my primary role, is to make sure our learners who need technology for any reason, and then some of our universal tools, that we have the training and implementation support in place. So I'm always going to be an OT through and through. It's how I look at the world. OTs are kind of strange birds sometimes, and we see things differently than other professions. And it definitely helps in the work that I do for assistive technology and for comprehensive literacy to kind of have that kind of function first approach of from an OT perspective, it's all about helping you do the things that you either did before or want to do, maybe just in an adapted way. And so that holds true for every other aspect of the work I do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like us species need you guys in our lives to kind of keep us balanced and see the pieces we might be missing.
And vice versa. I mean, that's why, every organization puts out documents about the power of collaboration and teaming. It's one of my favorite documents to send people to. APTA, ASHA, and AOTA have a collaborative goal writing document. And really, the whole premise is we should be working together, which seems like a no-brainer, and yet, it's really important for every learner that the people that are working with them are all on the same page and utilizing the skills that are strengths for them to support the learner.
Yeah, I think that is something that I hear echoed a lot is that we're in silos. It feels like we're in silos, right? How many times do we have a student that goes for a wheelchair eval and they forget to put a mount on for the device because they haven't thought about that yet, right? Or, some adaptive supports that we may need for writing when we're looking at how we integrate that with AAC.
Absolutely. When it comes to AAC, I like to say, like the SLP is really important in AAC consideration, but they don't own all of AAC, nor should they, right? When it comes to mounting, when it comes to, students who are using power chairs and using, using their device to drive their chair. Those are all places where having us at the table is incredibly important. And I think the places we've seen OTs really be and PTs be a member of the team, we're seeing just more successful, cohesive outcomes for learners that it's not an afterthought to think, oh, wait, they need to be able to use such and such to drive their chair. Does their device do that? Like we're able to have those conversations in the forefront, which I think is incredibly important.
We are going to dive more into literacy because that is our season this year. And I know that that is a big passion of yours, just out of my own personal curiosity. Are there what areas drive you and what passion projects do you have going in the area of like AT and AAC, or is it all of the above?
So they're all intermingled, right? So if a learner has a great communication system that works for them, the chances of them having a way to access those 26 letters of the alphabet is much higher. So if they have that, chances are their social emotional kind of regulation supports are going to be in a better place because they're going to be able to advocate for what they need. So it's this big like spinning cyclical thing of we need all of those parts. And so absolutely AAC is a passion area of mine, but literacy to me it is an incredibly foundational skill. It's something that for many years for a lot of our learners was overlooked as a they can't or they're too something to not be able to participate in literature activities. And honestly, we it's nice to have the research, but um, outcomes and learners show you that literacy is incredibly critical to what happens to them post school and beyond in their adult lives.
So let's talk then about kind of your journey and your kind of something that you spearheaded when it comes to literacy, and that is the book study that you dove into. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about? You kind of already said the why, right? Like the importance of it and your passion for it, but where did it originate? How did that
The
start?
how. So, Dr. Erikson and Koppenhaver's book came out in late 2019, early 2020, and there was just a small group of us that were in multiple places in the country that kind of wanted to dive deeper into it. So I was like, well, this is one medium we could use. We could use Facebook. At that time, I anticipated it to be 25, 50 people talking about a book. Um, it is now over 6,000, I think, that it is international. Lots of people from many other countries, lots of parents. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I said, hey, let's do a book study on Facebook. And so now we are in the middle at the time of this recording of round six. So the sixth time we have gone through this book in some ideation. This time is a little bit more case study focused. And honestly, like I said, it just started with a little small professional learning community wanting to dive deeper into this book and figure out what's my role in the position that I'm in, person B wanting to know what do I need to know about it. And now it's a whole different beast where, there's probably daily, if not every other day, some poster interaction about questions about comprehensive literacy, questions about their specific learner, or about big picture implementation. And the hope is that we're able to provide that sense of community for people who are lone man on an island trying to figure out how to do this work that's very, very important to the trajectory of our learners' lives. But it's also very isolating work to do because they're often the only person in a school or sometimes in a school cooperation or district that's doing this work. So that's how it all started. And again, I would have never imagined we would have ended up here.
What a great way to build capacity, or at least kind of like monitor the capacity that you might be building, knowing that people are so invested that they're joining and the numbers have grown to this size.
Absolutely. And, it's like with every professional learning community, there are folks that will message me and be like, I apologize, I'm just lurking in the group. Please don't apologize, right? Like that's your learning style and that's what's working for you. And there are folks that are like, oh, I have a bazillion questions, every degree in the middle, we have professionals, we have administrators, we have parents, we have a ton of parents. And many of them are in very remote places where, the education system has not caught up to the research yet. And they're trying to figure out how to do this on their own. And so trying to find a way to support that length and breadth of needs, we've had to get creative. We've had to think really, really critically about what do we want this group to be. And I keep looping back to the word community, whether it's professional learning community or just a community. That's kind of where I keep landing. And so everything I do is kind of with that focus of, is this going to help build up our learning and our community in this area?
I love that. So let me just ask, what did you discover, let's say the first time you read the book, or what do you discover, like what are you still discovering? You're in the sixth time that you're doing this as a group and spearheading it.
So, from a personal perspective, I think the very first time I went through the book, it was like an aha. I had been to camps that Erikson and Koppenhaver had done before previously, but to see it all compiled in one place, while it is a research-based book, it is a very friendly read. It's not like overwhelming. It's got lots of statistics and research, which is helpful, but it's also very practical. So I think having it all in one place was really great. And I think from an OT perspective, we cannot understate or overstate the amount of importance we have in literacy. And I think people definitely overlook that at times. They're very quick to think, oh, well, you're going to help them with handwriting. Well, that's partially literacy, but it's more about them interacting with those 26 letters to be able to do a thing. And if that's true for our learners who are in fourth grade pursuing a regular standard diploma, it's true of our learners who have more significant needs, who might be on a different pathway. So I think early on, it was really about, this is really great that this is all in one place, that we have a research body now to talk about what's best for our learners. And we're continuing to grow, and they're continuing to do research. So I think where we're kind of looking at now, and the research is what's guiding this, is what do we do for classrooms, which is 90% of our classrooms, where the learners are some emergent literacy and some conventional literacy. How do we kind of build the bridge, which is literally the project name that's out at UNC Chapel Hills, Building Bridges ELA. How do we build that bridge for that educator to know, how the heck do we do this in a day-to-day schedule when I've got learners that are in both places? I don't have a class of just students who are doing emergent literacy. I've got a class that's much wider than that. So I think now it's about, people are starting to really get to be in the space where they understand literacy is important for our learners, right? For learners who have more complex needs, that it is a thing we need to do. So I don't think we're fighting that mindset battle as much as it is we're fighting the how. Like practically, what does this look like? So I think now it's more about the practical implementation, which is I think what led me to like do more case study kind of walkthroughs. So this round and probably going forward, we have 3 learners who are just generated by an amalgamation of learners I've had over the years. And we're kind of following them through the process of as we learn about alphabetic knowledge, what does this mean for this learner? And as we learn about writing, what does this mean for this learner? So I think now it's more about how do we implement?
Yeah, and just pulling that practical understanding to a more problem-solving framework so that then
Right.
they can apply that to their students.
And knowing that, pretty much every person I've ever talked with or worked with in this area, there's always a lot of yeah buts. There's a lot of but my search situation is different and my administration this and I'm like I like to take the yeah buts and make them yes buts because I think for a lot of our learners, like you may be the one educator, therapist, or whoever that interacts with this learner that truly believes that they can learn literacy skills. And if you pass up the opportunity to be that person for that learner, like again, it's a trajectory thing for our learners that if you have access to the 26 letters of the alphabet and you know how to put them together to make words, even if you're not a great speller, right? We have word prediction. It's on almost every device that our students use to communicate. So even if we give them access to that alphabet, we're giving them the ability to produce novel messages so they can tell us what they want, what they need, and what they don't want. So I think the connection for an AAC user 100% is about being able to self-advocate. For a lot of our other learners, it's about unlocking the love of reading, right? We have more typical learners that will sit and read a book in the afternoon, and that's their choice of a leisure skill on a Saturday afternoon. And for a lot of our learners with more complex needs, that's just not a thing they've ever experienced. So getting them ways that they can read with their ears instead of their eyes so that they understand what does it mean to be transported into a book,
Mhm.
and to kind of be journeying along with the character. And we have a lot of learners that thrive on just on those experiences of literature and leisure skills. And that's again coming back to the OT piece of me is a huge piece of something that's important if you're looking at having a fulfilled life. You got to have a balance.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast earlier this week too on the Pygmalion effect and the idea that if our mindset is that they can't do it, then they won't do it, right? In the simplest terms, if they can't do it, they won't do it. And if we believe that they can, then they have a higher likelihood to succeed. And I think this is such a like all these things that you're mentioning are just this with embedded within this framework of like if we just simply believe, try, understand that it's possible that then these students can really make some strides towards getting to more autonomous and
Right.
authentic opportunities for language.
Absolutely. And is it going to take longer? Absolutely. Is it going to take more effort on the part of adults to figure out how to make this work for learners? Yeah, probably. Are you going to fail a lot before you succeed? Yeah, probably. That's just education, right? And so I think if we're willing to put in that time investment for our learners so that they can have access to the alphabet, to access literature where they see themselves as characters, they see themselves in their ethnicities. All of those things are really important for our learners because they're having to manage lots of different variables, and as they grow into who they are as an adult with a disability, we want to make sure that their access to literacy continues. We have lots of parents of adults in the group that is 35. Is it too late? No. Absolutely not. Let's find something they want to read about. Let's get them an audiobook about cars. Let's get them, to me, it's about getting them invested in things that are highly motivating and highly interesting. I don't like to do things I don't like or I don't care about, and it's no different for our learners.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you were going to, let's say someone's like, I think I want to read this book, but I'm not sure. And do I have the time frame? What would be a quick sell? Like what would be your three big takeaways that someone who's like, okay, should I, shouldn't I? What are your three takeaways of the book? Like, yeah, this is what you need to know so you can dive more in.
Yeah, so this is not a me quote, and I'm probably going to misquote, but doing any good emergent or conventional literacy is better than doing none at all, right? Like, so just start, right? And again, if that is your classroom and you bring them together to do a shared reading experience and that's all you add for a little bit, okay, that's better than not ever starting, right? So I think trying to make sure that that just start is probably number one. Just start in a space that you maybe have some comfort in, or you see your students or learners being interested in. Start there. Definitely, doing a book study in whatever format works for you, with other people who are engaged or invested in the same kind of work, whether that's our Facebook group or something different, I think is a huge way to kind of have a shared experience of, a community again, where you can kind of voice, hey, I tried this and it really didn't work. And somebody can say, hey, I've tried something similar, but I did this instead. Maybe try that. So I think leaning into community while you're doing it. And I think if anything else, I hope that people walk away from experience with the book or with the group, on the Facebook book group study is, that it's possible. Like there's lots of tools and lots of resources and lots of very knowledgeable others that are out there that know what this can look like. And so I would encourage people to lean into that. It's why I think the medium of the Facebook group has worked well, because people can post videos, they can post pictures. So you're able to kind of see that in action thing. So, I mean, there's no movement forward in emergent literacy that's bad. It's really hard to make it a bad step forward, right? Just do something. Shared reading, predictable chart writing, get in there and engage with kids with letters and alphabetic knowledge. Like and all of those things that are should be happening in our classrooms anyway. But the roadmap on how can we do this well is what this book is about.
Yep. And so you mentioned building bridges, and that like that being one of our next steps. And I know the room was packed at ATIA recently, as always, when Erikson is present, as it should be. And I think that my question is just what resources pop up on this book study group? What resources have you dove into to supplement and enhance this comprehensive literacy for all? Like, what are some other resources people can go to after they've read the book or in addition to reading the book?
The loaded question, because my first answer is it depends. My second answer is, we have a lot of really great models of how this is working, right? So we have Tyler Reader, which is going to eventually become Monarch Reader, and going to be supported by Building Wings, which is a different company. But Tar Heel Reader is books that other students have written, other adults have written. We have Tar Heel Shared Reader. There's for every area of the book, there are a plethora of resources, whether it's apps, whether it is specific methodologies that people have used that are working. And I think that's my encouragement to, even if you want to be a lurker in the group, that's okay, because it might be that lurking and searching for that one thing that you're like, I'm really struggling with alphabetic knowledge, and you can get here's a bunch of apps or websites people have used for activities. If that's your one takeaway from the group, then we've enhanced your knowledge in that one area, and that's to me a success.
I feel like we're forgetting one of the obvious things. We will put this in the show notes, but can you tell anybody that's going to go on Facebook what the group name is called so they can search for it?
Absolutely. It's not incredibly creative. It's called the Comprehensive Literacy for All
Books.
Book Study, I
Yep.
believe is its full name. And I know you can link in the show notes. I think I sent you that link as well. If you search for Comprehensive Literacy for All, it's probably the very first thing that pops up on Facebook. Pretty easy to find. And again, we encourage anybody to join who has an interest in what does this comprehensive literacy instruction look like. And at whatever level you're available to participate, that could be, I want to dive in and really intensively answer every question that's proposed. Or if it's, I'm going to watch and listen to the discussions that are happening. Or if it's, I check in once a month and I search and I see what was there. Again, because we've done this for so many rounds now, I think we have a good buildup of resources that even just as a searchable group, it's a great first place to start, because again, we do have very, very engaged parents that are posting pictures of their kids doing things, teachers with permission that are posting classrooms. So I think all of that, being able to see it in action, I think is incredibly helpful.
And I like how you mentioned just the variety of people coming to search for information, right? You don't have to be a speech therapist or a teacher to go and join. You can be a parent, you can be a support staff, really anybody that's searching for the knowledge to support literacy instruction. Fair?
Absolutely. We have siblings of older siblings of folks who are younger and still in school systems or who have graduated that they're working on literacy with and everything in between. Like I said, I've never done a formal like poll in the group to be like, how do you identify yourself? Are you a parent? Are you a it'd be interesting data. I mean, I can see where in the world they're from, but not necessarily like how they identify themselves. I would guess large amount of educators, large amount of parents, large amount of OT, PT, speech, and then after that, it's kind of probably a mix of a lot of other character groups. And I think, again, that's back to these are all the people that should be teaming together to support an individual learner or a classroom of learners to do literacy work anyway. So
Mhm.
it's good that that's represented.
Again, and it's great that it is. Like that's just a testament to how many people need the information and want the information.
Absolutely.
Another loaded question, but are there areas you feel like we still need to improve or we need more information after reading the book? Like where I know building bridges is one of those they have a trajectory, a target. Sophia came on and talked about that in our first episode this season and just kind of a little bit of the general trajectory, but anything you would add to what we still need, what we're still searching for?
I think there are still, while there are struggles for learners who are in a self-contained setting of all kids who have significant disabilities, I think we also don't know a lot about how to do this work well for learners who may be in a very inclusive setting, that they are the only student who is still working on emergent literacy and everybody else is doing conventional. So I know that's one space that I get a lot of questions about. And then I think just, we have such technological advances in a lot of areas. And I don't know that those have all filtered down yet to our learners, right? You talk about or hear about the science of reading movement. And there is nothing in comprehensive literacy that is contradictory to science of reading. It is all aligned with science of reading. But the majority of the research that was done when they talk about the science of reading didn't include our learners, right? Like
Yep.
they were kind of an exclusionary criteria to many of those studies. It doesn't mean that the research doesn't still apply. And so I think kind of again, bridging the gap of what do we know about what works for our learners and how do we adapt or apply that to our learners? I think that's the next little jump forward of thinking about literacy critically to know there are lots of really great programs for phonics and phonemic awareness, for example. Their pilot studies were not including kids who had, no mouth words and used AAC or who had significant physical disabilities. Does that mean that those programs couldn't work for our learners? Absolutely not. They are working. We've got places where it's happening. But I think just making those connections, better connections, and then adding that technology layer to say, if you're a learner whose body doesn't work to access, a letter card to tell us how do we best make that accessible to you, knowing everything we know. And what we know today in 2024 is going to be drastically different in 2026. So I think just trying to keep people moving forward, knowing that technology is going to keep changing, but it's also we still have to catch up a little for our learners who have more complex needs, especially from a physical access perspective.
Yeah.
Because if you can't hear a learner read, it's really hard to figure out maybe where their deficits are. And so if they're only building their inner voice as an AAC user who doesn't ever verbalize, we have to do things a little differently for us to know that they know what they need to know.
Mhm.
And I think there are still gaps there because, again, it's not a place that people do a lot of research.
Yeah, in general, when you look at the big scope of it, it's still a low incidence, and then we have those microchasms of like, here's another low incidence, and here's another one, and how do they all combine? And the other thing that what you were saying reminded me of was the idea that the strategies that are in place in this book are now just slowly starting to be extrapolated to other areas. I saw a really great presentation. I'm forgetting who did it on the idea of saying core words in your head and doing core word instruction with the same strategy of how we are introducing these letters, similar to the strategies that are talked about in the book, right? And how we can say it in your head, and then we use some examples and just that idea of how we approach, even instead of just doing a core word of the week, right? How we can approach it in a similar way for both intrinsic and extrinsic, implicit and explicit instruction. Uh,
Absolutely. And I think we're very fortunate that we have a very growing library of adult AAC users that can tell us a lot about what we did well and what we really messed up. And I think that helps us to know, like, because they are literate adults who obviously learned to read, and it probably was incidental learning in a lot of ways. Like, we probably didn't do our best instruction for a lot of our adult AAC users. And now they're able to reflect back to us. This is something that really worked to develop that inner voice, and this is something that really made it harder. So I think leaning into the voices of autistic adults and other AAC users is incredibly important to inform our work now for our pre-K, kindergarten, first grade students who are coming in, maybe already, I mean, it's a double deficit. We've got kids who already had a significant developmental delay, and then we have COVID on top of it. So trying to kind of how do we help continue to bring them along, but informed by the work of what we know from our autistic adult and adult with disabilities population. So I think it's exciting to see work happening in that area and research informally or formally happening in that area, because there's nothing more, I don't know, reassuring or informative than to talk to an adult who has been through the school system and for them to tell you, like, when you did this, this was really helpful, or when you did this, that really made it harder. And in the moment, they don't always have the words to tell you that, but to know that later even is super helpful to inform our work for comprehensive literacy, but also in general.
yeah. Okay, I feel like we've hit everything, probably just given people just enough to make sure that they join the group and also just dive further into all the resources that you've mentioned. So I can't let you go though without asking about your favorite AAC moment to date. There's a bonus if it's literacy related, but it doesn't have to be.
So,
Is
oh
there
my gosh,
something that sticks out, or a couple?
Ah,
We
so
like to land the
so
plane there.
many. I mean, I think the power of AAC, right, is that we have kids that are often trapped with only an internal voice. And probably the best examples of knowing that you've done what you needed to do to help that learner is when you get sass and attitude or talk back from an AAC learner. You're like, okay, great, you have mastered some communication skills in a very effective manner to give me that attitude. So I think that's always a very positive development, even though parents are like, oh, well, take that word out because they shouldn't be able to say that. Oh, yes, they should. Now they can't say it in the middle of class, interrupting class and being inappropriate, but I think that's always a really powerful full circle moment when we're in that space where we're able to have them effectively communicate. And it's as an OT, it's most rewarding when those are learners who had significant access challenges to overcome. What we have technology wise today, even from 5 years ago, I have kids that are very proficient head mouse users, that are eye gaze users, that are switch scanners, that the technology to support them on the platforms they're using just didn't really exist a couple of years ago. So to see them doing things that probably when they started school, these are older kids now, when they started school, we had a lot of educators that went, oh, I don't really know how this is going to go for this learner. Like, we're going to do our best, but I think the outcomes for, I feel old when I say this generation of learners that we've got in elementary school now are going to be drastically different than kids that are exiting the system now, because we know better. And so hopefully we're doing better. And that's the goal of any comprehensive literacy work is, we talk a lot about functional skills and making sure that we are supporting our learners with that, but there is nothing more functional than literacy. If you think across your day, there are so many points in which you being a literate adult enables your success in the world. And we need to strive for that to be the case for all of our learners.
Mm. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that that is so important. And I think I'm sure there's been occasions where you can think back and have someone tell you, oh, I don't even think they understand cause and effect. Like we're just gonna hang out here with the switch. And then, something changes about what you're doing, whether it be the technology or the mindset or just an access point. And and then they're a head mouse user and they're a power mobility user, like, you know what I mean? And then it's just like, wow, like, yeah, and you saw it, and then everybody else gets to see it too.
Right. And sometimes it's frustrating on behalf of the professionals because sometimes that's not a 1 month thing. Sometimes that's a year thing or a 2 year thing. And you just have to continue to coach and support and wait for whether it's the mindset or the belief or the functionality to shift, even though in the back of your head you kind of feel like you know where you're going with this learner. And that's, I mean, that's where coaching and mentoring and that longevity relationship is really important because maybe they're willing to take a risk to do something different if you have developed that rapport with them.
Yep. Well, okay, so speaking of, I mean, I know that you are very present on the group, but if someone had an additional question, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Email, I'm on Twitter/X, Instagram, the Facebook group for sure. So Facebook Messenger. I probably get inquiries in all of those places related to this work or other work I do. So any of those are completely fine. And if I can't put my finger on a resource, I will make sure I find the person who can, because I think we have the resources out there and making sure that we tap into our community to connect the people to the resources is again, it's a big part of why I feel like this group is doing what it needs to do. And I just looked while we were chatting, and it's 6,740 some people, which is
We're honing in on 7. We can do it.
we're getting pretty close. And again, it's not about numbers for me. It's a nice shocking number because again, I was thinking 25 or 50 people in 2020. But to me, it's if I have people that are exposed to these concepts through the group, it's a safe entry point, right? People who like Facebook are familiar with Facebook, and to engage in a group that maybe you just lurk in is a safe way to feel like I could figure some of this stuff out or see it in action without having to ask a question or to say I don't know something. It's a safe entry point for a lot of people to dive deeper in the work.
Well, I just want to say thank you for moderating it too, because that is no easy task. That is definitely something that takes a lot of back channel effort and, cognitive and actual energy too to do.
It does, and this round has been a joy. Every round is different in a different way, but this one I think making the connections to case studies has been really informative for people to see, not just in theory but in action. What could this look like, and how do we take data we may have and transform that to inform our instruction? I think that's been really excited. But yes, it's a labor of love, sometimes emphasis on labor, sometimes emphasis on love. It just depends on the moment in the group. But for as long as there are people who are wanting to engage in discussions around comprehensive literacy, and for as long as that platform exists, we will be there to talk about comprehensive literacy for all.
Well, on behalf of the district, on behalf of Innovative AAC Solutions, we just want to thank Alyssa for coming on today. Please go check out the group. It's like she said, it's going to have tons and tons of resources with practical knowledge and examples, and a place where you can ask those questions about things or gaps that you may be finding in places you're stuck. So check it out. And again, thank you. And thank you for coming on today.
Of course, thank you.